If you'd like to learn whether the Rock Retirement Club could be an important piece of your retirement puzzle, come hang out with me on Thursday, July 15th at 7 p.m., and I'll share a little bit about the club, answer your questions, and we can just talk about rock and retirement. Learn more at livewithroger.com.
Hi, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. And if you're new here, this show is dedicated to helping you have the confidence to not just survive retirement, but to truly rock retirement. Now, you may have noticed we don't have intro music for today's show, and I may sound a little bit different. That's because I'm actually in Colorado getting ready to come home from a month-long sabbatical/vacation. And I'll share some thoughts on that journey here in a week or so. But I wanted to make sure that we continued this month-long theme of answering your questions, your retirement questions, so you can continue to improve your journey towards retirement. Now, big reminder, next month, starting 1 week from now, we are doing a month-long series on choosing your withdrawal strategy in retirement. So we're going to explore what does that mean, one, and then how do you go about choosing, do I do a 4% rule? Do I buy annuities? How do I create this? So that's what we're going to do next week. But for this week, I invited a number of my friends on to answer some of your questions. And at the end, we're going to have Beachwalker, Kevin Lyles, the head of education in the Rock Retirement Club, share his Coach's Corner. So let's get started.
Hi, this is Andy Panko, owner of Tenon Financial in Metuchen, New Jersey, moderator of the Facebook group Taxes and Retirement, and one of the coaches in the Rock Retirement Club. Here's a question from Carl about the Rule of 55. Carl asks, my current employer does not permit Rule of 55 distributions, only age 59 and a half. Could I set up an individual 401k as a business owner with Rule of 55 provisions in place, roll over my 401k from current employer after I separated from them into the individual 401k I've set up, and then take Rule of 55 distributions at that time? I might have to go the 72T route if this solo 401k hack isn't workable or kosher, but I'm just trying to see if this is a feasible workaround to get at the Rule of 55 distributions option. Great question, Carl. Thanks. Yes, Rule 55 can apply to a solo 401k, but it's almost certainly not going to be able to function like you presumably want it to. As you know, in order to be able to take a penalty-free distribution from a 401k prior to age 59 and a half, you need to have a separation of service from that employer in the year you turn 55 or later. So far, so good. Where the idea will run into issues is around the quote-unquote separation of service from your own self-employment. First, how exactly do you define separation of service when you're self-employed? Is it when you decide you're not taking on any more clients? Is it when you formally liquidate whatever operating entity you may have formed? Or is it when you go more than a certain amount of time with no revenue? I frankly don't know. But more importantly, with solo 401k plans, I believe you need to technically unwind and terminate the plan upon cessation of the business. In other words, once you have your formal separation of service that would enable you to take a penalty-free Rule of 55 distribution, you also have to shut down the plan at that point because the business belying it no longer exists, which means you can essentially only take one distribution, either a rollover to another qualified plan or IRA, or an outright distribution of the whole of the account. Now, I'm guessing your goal was to leave the solo 401k open and take periodic distributions over time, which I don't believe is possible. Or at least I wouldn't want to test it by leaving the account open long after your separation of service and finding out the hard way by the IRS later informing you that what you did was not up to snuff. My other concern with this idea is whether the IRS will try to claim you didn't have a real profit motive for starting the business in the first place. Or to put it another way, I wouldn't want to find out what would happen if the IRS suspects you started the business with the primary goal of opening a solo 401k, just so you can then close the business and get around otherwise having to pay the 10% penalty on distributions from the 401k. Thanks again for the question, Carl. I applaud the ingenuity behind this creative idea, but I unfortunately don't think it will work.
Hello, faithful Retirement Answer Man listeners. Chad Smith here from the Financial Symmetry podcast in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm excited to drop in while Roger's out spending the month in Colorado. I'm guessing noodling on which bike trail to ride this afternoon or which margarita he'll enjoy. But before leaving, Roger passed along a question from a listener named Mark that I'll summarize and then provide some thoughts. So Mark has been married for 34 years. Congrats on that, by the way. He's retired and his wife plans to retire soon in the next 6 months. He mentioned he's a big planner. They've stayed on script basically with everything from when to have children to when they retired. They've had 2 homes for many years, a primary home and a beach condo, and were on schedule to have both paid off, and then plans changed. They recently decided they wanted to move to a more modern home at the beach. So they sold their beach condo and moved, but kept their primary residence until his wife retires. With the hot housing market, they decided to go ahead and sell their primary residence and are now renting an apartment until full retirement for his wife when they'll move to the beach. They received a substantial amount of cash for the home sale and invested in age-appropriate mix of investments versus paying down their low-interest mortgage. With their combined pensions, he mentioned they can afford the mortgage and living expenses with a decent amount left over, and they're still delaying Social Security. So their question is, are they missing anything with the decision to not pay off their mortgage? So first off, nice job, Mark. You've set yourself up very well for retirement. And this is a question that we hear often, and there are a few ways to view it. That's because for most, there's an emotional side that tends to get more weight when dealing with a decision around debt. People imagine the way they'll feel when they have no mortgage payment, and that brings a lot of people joy. So they work extra hard to avoid having debt, and for some, that's the right call. If you're losing sleep at night in retirement because you have a mortgage but can pay it off with the savings you have, then lowering your stress levels and your overall life enjoyment outweighs the financial benefit of keeping a low-interest mortgage. But there's other emotional components attached to paying off a mortgage that people can miss. For example, leaving a legacy ranks high on some people's goal list. This could be for children, churches, charities, any passion really that's close to your heart that you could support. If this is important enough, then pursuing a strategy that maximizes your wealth could move to the top of the list. In these situations, the mortgage debt could be viewed more as a tool and comes down to more of a numbers comparison versus emotions. That's because it provides you that fancy financial term of leverage. With people living longer, your retirement could be much longer than you expected originally. And if we just assumed a 5 to 6% return per year on your typical mortgage amount, say $300,000, the compound growth that would occur over the 30 some odd years versus the interest you'd pay on the mortgage at 3% would be substantial. But the biggest thing that jumped out about Mark's question to me is the idea that they had planned their whole life and things had been very scripted until things changed. This is where financial planning shines because our hopes, dreams, desires, and needs change. In fact, retirement will likely be your longest unscripted journey. Ongoing financial planning allows you to consider, adjust, and prepare to the extent you can for the unexpected. Like considering the impact of what larger unexpected expenses might pop up in retirement. It might be medical expenses or a long-term care situation. It could be starting a business or just taking larger trips and paying for the family to come along, all of your family. One of my favorite financial planning questions is, what does this now make possible? I think Roger uses that from time to time as well. And for Mark, by taking out a mortgage, and since the mortgage and your living expenses are covered by your pensions, you gain an amazing and tremendous amount of flexibility to have more wealth to steward throughout your retirement, how you and your wife choose to do for the expected and the unexpected. So nice work. And thanks to Roger for letting me hop in the seat this week. I hope that happy hour margarita is tasty.
Hey, Conrad, this is not Roger Whitney. My name is Taylor Schulte, and I host the Stay Wealthy Retirement Podcast, where I have a ton of fun translating complex retirement topics into plain English. Social Security is one of my favorite topics, and since Roger is noodling around Colorado right now and walking life with his Great Dane Sherlock Bones, I agreed to jump in to help answer your great question today. As you recently found out, many financial planning tools that advisors use default to increasing Social Security benefits by 3 to 4% each year when they're running projections. And while 3 to 4% might be close to the historical rate of inflation over, let's say, the last 100 years or so, it's not the kind of increase that we've seen with Social Security in recent history, much less on a year-over-year basis. In fact, since the year 2000, Social Security benefits have increased on average by about 2% per year. However, in a handful of those years like 2009, 2010, and even 2015, the increase was exactly zero. And your question today brings up a really good reminder about assumptions that you or your advisor are using in a financial plan. At my firm, we prefer to be more conservative with our assumptions and put as much pressure on the financial plan as possible. So along with knocking Social Security benefit increases down to 1%, we'll set life expectancy at age 100. We'll use higher than average inflation assumptions, and we will also lower our future stock and bond return assumptions. We would rather be prepared for extreme, unpredictable situations than get caught off guard and scramble to get back on track. The way we see it is if the plan works when it's being stressed by every possible assumption, then we can give our clients more confidence in their retirement. And then any sort of surprise to the upside is just icing on the cake. So to clearly answer your question, no, I don't think that using a 3 to 4% number for future projected COLA increases is prudent. It's certainly possible that we see future COLA increases in that range or maybe even higher, but I wouldn't bet my retirement plan on it. My suggestion would be to run what we call a baseline retirement analysis that assumes no COLA increases and just use that as your starting point. If your plan is successful without any increases, then you should be feeling pretty good. And then any COLA adjustments along the way will be just a nice bonus for you. That being said, if you do prefer to include an increase in your planning, because odds are you'll probably have increases between now and age 70, then I would lean towards using something in the 1 to 2% range. So I hope that helps. Thanks again for the great question, Conrad. And if you haven't already, please do check out the Stay Wealthy Retirement Show. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any additional questions.
Hey, Roger. Tanya Nichols here from Align Financial in Duluth, Minnesota. Here to answer Jim's or a part of Jim's question on health savings accounts versus health reimbursement accounts. And really just want to talk about concerns around healthcare costs pre-65 before Medicare kicks in. So Jim and his wife are 62. They own kind of a side hustle, payroll and accounting business, but they also, it sounds like, have a corporate job. So they've got some corporate type health insurance. And he's convinced they can retire, and he's trying to get his wife on board, but she's got some hesitation around the cost of healthcare if they leave the corporate job. So his main question is, what are the differences between the two? And I am not an expert at small business health insurance, but I thought I would provide a little context on how to maybe think about the potential for increased costs. My first take is whenever someone comes to me with the type of concern around health insurance, it's usually because it's really fuzzy. It's like a black hole. That's what health insurance feels like sometimes, like this black hole of unknown. And so my tip would be to just dig in. And it sounds like Jim's on that path, and maybe just making sure his wife gets included in that conversation about, all right, well, the range of an incremental cost might be X to Y, and multiply that by the remaining number of months until you're 65. And then just get a concrete dollar amount or range of dollar amount. And sometimes that's really helpful because it's a short time frame that you actually have this incrementally higher expense. And for some people, some of their other costs go down when they leave the corporate job. You know, maybe just obviously lots of people are working from home nowadays, but it used to be sometimes our clothing budget, our parking budget, our going out to lunch budget, our gas budget. We're not traveling back and forth to work anymore. So there's other things that could offset the incrementally higher health insurance costs too. So for a lot of my clients, I don't want to let a short-term higher cost stop them if they're in a good financial position to do it. So that might be how I would frame that decision, is quantifying the actual cost for the next few years. So thanks for the question, Jim, and thanks for the invitation to talk to your listeners, Roger. I do love that. We had a lot of fun with our meetup with all the women in the RRC here last month, and I hope that you are enjoying Colorado. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Hello, Roger. This month I want to talk about meaning and purpose in retirement. We often tell retirees that they need to have meaning and purpose in their retirement lives in order to have a successful retirement. And I certainly agree you need both of those. But we don't do a good enough job, I think, defining what we mean by meaning and purpose. And we don't talk about how those terms differ. So that's what I want to do today. And hopefully, by hearing this, our listeners will get a better idea of how to build a meaningful, purposeful retirement life. When we talk about meaning, it's an internal concept. It's something that is important to you, that brings you satisfaction or pleasure, that allows you to use your unique gifts and talents, to be appreciated and to feel useful. And when I say it's an internal concept, I really mean that. It doesn't matter whether society agrees that something is important or not. Society may think it's frivolous, but if it's important to you, then it's meaningful. Without meaning, life can become monotonous. We feel out of sync or like we've lost our way in life. And often we make the mistake of trying to subvert true meaning with mere diversions or entertainment or trivial activities. You can be happy sitting on a couch watching an old movie, but you won't have a very fulfilling life if you do that. It's sort of like filling your stomach up with popcorn and cotton candy. It may taste good while it's going down, but after a while, you're going to be in trouble. Purpose, on the other hand, is an external concept. It involves looking outside yourself to make a difference in another person, place, or a thing. And it doesn't matter whether it's a small or large person, place, or thing. In other words, you don't need to take up a great cause that newspaper writers will recognize you as changing the world. You just need to make a change inside your world. You need to make a difference in what surrounds you or the people who surround you. Making a grandchild smile can be just as purposeful for you as trying to end world hunger. I think retirees often get stuck on purpose because they feel like they need to do those grand gestures, and you really don't. You just need to look around your world and see, how can I make things better for someone, for something, or someplace? So the key to having a successful retirement, in my opinion, is to combine activities that bring both meaning and purpose. If you take up a great cause that's not meaningful to you in a search for purpose, you're not going to have a sense of fulfillment. And it's not ultimately going to make you happy because it's not important to you. Similarly, if you fill your life only with activities that affect you, you're going to be left feeling shallow or superficial. So I think the key is to decide what are meaningful activities, fill your retirement life with them, and then look around and see how you can make a difference. If you do that, I'm sure you'll be successful.
Well, thanks for joining us today for this a little bit unique show. Next month, we're going to get into choosing your withdrawal strategy. But for now, go have a wonderful 4th of July. I'll see you next week.
Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.